I got a call from Hiromi.
Hey Hiromi. What's up?
Motoko.
I did it. I got us a gig to get supplies. You are going to love this.
Hiromi practically squealed into the phone as I pushed myself away from the workbench to focus on the call.
Okay, hit me.
Okay, so, I was talking to my dad, and he mentioned there had been an AV carrying supplies shot down. I think you can figure it out from there?
Oh, easily.
Arasaka doesn't care so much for the supplies, just wants to send a message.
Dad does want some of the supplies returned. There was some data he would like to retrieve, if you catch my drift. But trust me, I negotiated really hard. Papa was so proud. We will walk away with loads of equipment. Alright. What do we know? Do we know where the supplies are now? That's the problem. No, not exactly. It was definitely some nomads. The attack happened in the Badlands, but whether it's nomads or Wraith, Arasaka doesn't know. That's for us to find out basically.
You didn't already confirm our participation, right?
No way. We have a contract that we negotiated, but it's unsigned. I wanted to run it past you first to make sure it's even possible. Hiromi trailed off. I'm pretty confident, but you're the one who has to do it. Hiromi, you're perfect. Send me what data you have, okay? I'm going to call Saul and make sure it wasn't the Aldecaldos. If it wasn't, that narrows it down, and he might even know who took it. Alright, I have the info, sending now. I checked over the text. The supplies were taken out of a downed AV. All men had been killed, and by the time Arasaka had sent a second AV to check it out, everyone on board was dead, and the stuff was taken. This happened last week, and so far Arasaka hadn't dedicated any resources to handle the problem. And your dad, he's responsible for finding the shipment? I just want to know, in case we refuse, we wouldn't be screwing him over, right? Nope. Dad is the one who is in charge of the guy that was responsible for it. That guy is. Well, Dad just mentioned he was no longer a problem. He might have been responsible for leaking the flight plan, willingly or not. Okay. Give me a few minutes and I'll call you right back. Can you get Ichi and Malcolm? We should all discuss this. Hee. You got it. Leave it all to your fixer, Hiromi-chan. I just laughed at how cute Hiromi had tried to sound, but hung up a moment after and made the call to Saul. Ringing. This is Saul. Saul, it's Motoko. Do you have a moment to talk? Business. I added at the end. Sure, what's going on? Let's just say I'm looking at a contract to hunt down someone that downed an Arasaka AV last week. Current assumption is some nomad group. I just want to make sure I'm not going to be hunting people I actually like. If I take this, I won't be hunting down you, or your family. Right? The line was quiet for a moment, but Saul spoke up a moment after clearly. Normally I wouldn't want to answer that sort of question, but in this case, it wasn't us, so I don't have to beat around the bush and pretend. We don't go after corp AVs unless it's on contract, and we haven't poked any core in a while. Much less Arasaka. Sounds like a Wraith group. Probably on contract by Militech. I assumed it was a countercorp thing. Glad to hear it isn't you guys. Sounds like I'll be running around the Badlands in the next few days. Maybe I'll stop by and say hi. Maybe with more Wraith vehicles that might need new owners. I offered. Tell you what, kid. You've been square with us, and I do appreciate the call to make sure you aren't taking a contract on my family. I don't think we have much need for more vehicles, but I'll contact Dakota for you. She'll likely give you a call, might even have some information that might narrow your target down a bit. If I know Dakota, she'll take a chunk off from the vehicles if you can supply them in payment. That would be perfect. Thanks, Saul. I really appreciate it. No problem, kid. Good hunting. Thanks. I quickly ended the call and pushed my chair away from my workbench so I could give myself enough space to quickly spin myself around as I giggled at Kit my feet. New gig. Welcome to the Section 9 pre-mission debrief. I called out as Malcolm finally arrived and I handed him his favorite Nicola and ushered him inside the apartment. Thanks? He questioned, looking around, but Hiromi just waved at him lazily from the couch, her face still buried in a laptop she had brought with. Don't mind Motoko, she is just excited. Hey. I'm not excited. I'm super duper excited. I called out happily, and I was. A nomad group wouldn't just be a couple dudes in an apartment. This would take actual work to plan out. I would have to go in full ninja mode, and murder potentially dozens of bad guys. So much XP. So much loot. I would actually have my team with me to loot the place. Sure, the Arasaka helmet was only mid, but their armor was good, and so we would definitely end up with weapons and armor for my team. We would look so fucking cool after. Alright, settle down. Hiromi demanded, pointing mostly at me. Here is what we know, and it isn't much. Thanks to Motoko knowing the old Ikaldo leader, I got in contact with Dakota Smith. She's one of the big fixers in the Badlands. And we got some potential targets for who took the shipment, but nothing concrete. The Badlands is pretty big. Malcolm sort of pointed out slowly. Are we even going to find these gonks? I mean, we can't do Motoko's camera trick out there. True, but we have all the data Arasaka has, and more importantly, we know who didn't take it. Hiromi added, and she turned to me. I threw her a thumbs up. We got some stuff to go on. Dakota was kind enough to give us some data in exchange for a lump payment now, which will be returned to us if and when we sell off the suspected RAF and Shiv vehicles we are probably going to come into ownership of soon. Oh, I want one. Malcolm called out, and Itchy slapped him on the back of his head. You already have 2 cars, you gonk. Nah. The Archer was stolen by my mum. She always wanted her own car, and I can't exactly drive my baby to the grocery store, he argued, waving his hands as if that would emphasize his point. It honestly only made me laugh all the harder. This gonk. He spent all his eddies on a car he can't even use. I cackled, and Malcolm grabbed an empty Nicolacan and chucked it at me, but my ninja reflexes were too strong. I managed to bat it away and smile widely at him. I can so use it. I just don't want to drive it around to places it could get targeted, or get me targeted. So you can't use it. I mumbled under my breath quietly enough that everyone heard it. Let's focus back up, you gonks. Hiromi demanded, poking me in the side to get me to stop messing with Malcolm. We will obviously need some actual on-the-ground scouting this time, but that's gonna be super dangerous. Thankfully Motoko's wheels are already made for the Badlands, so we got that. Itchy Malcolm and I will drive together in his van to Dakota's garage. She agreed to let us set up there as long as we don't drag any trouble there, so we have a staging ground. While I hit the locations we think might have the loot, I burst out, unable to contain myself. I would probably have to hit multiple Raffen bases. I shivered and didn't discreetly wipe my mouth at the idea of all the XP. Definitely not. Right. Motoko will go out scouting, but that's going to take a while. The Raffen will often have security around the camps in case someone is driving up on them, which means getting a mile or so off and walking. Motoko? Easy. I got good boots, and I'll bring lots of water in the car. I waved off the concern. Seriously, these city kids. As if walking a mile in a desert was that tough. I had done it before even, and I was way more beat up then. And there had been a sandstorm. So that's the idea. Motoko hits the locations, clears them out, we find our target, and Itchy moves in to remove it. What about the places Motoko scouts that aren't the target? Malcolm asked, once again proving he was my swiftly shooting up the favorite charts. Like, what about all that loot that will be left behind? Hiromi fumbled for a minute and looked to me. I just shrugged. We should expect this could take a while, days maybe. So if I clear a place you guys move in, we loot up and leave. Run the idea past Dakota, I guess. She'll probably take the loot, or know where we could offload it. Or she'll refuse cause it'll bring a lot of heat. Who knows? Okay. I'll run the idea past Dakota after this meeting. For now, Malcolm, we will loot it up, or if Dakota says it will bring too much heat, we can just sell the info. The older Kaldos would be happy to loot it in our place. Hiromi muttered. I could tell the way she said it that she liked the idea. I'm okay with that. It's gonna be hot out there. Ichi offered, but Malcolm was a true loot goblin and glared at both of them. Our eyes met. Yes, my chum. The loot shall be ours. We nodded silently. Compact complete. Oh. Malcolm, take my HMG too. That way you guys will have a lot of protection between Itchy's turret, and you backing him up. Ooh. Malcolm gave me a sinister smile, which I returned.
Okay, you maniacs, we do have another problem. Please turn your eyes to Arasaka's only information on the attackers, Hiromi demanded, and turned her laptop around, where there was a small text log. It was transcribed from the pilot, and I frowned deeply at what I read. That's going to be a problem, Ichi offered, but Malcolm jumped in instantly after. I want it. Dibs. Fuck. I cursed, because the idea of a vehicle with a rocket launcher on top was pretty rad. Like, at least as cool as my black Quadra. I really don't think you need a rocket launcher-equipped vehicle, Malcolm. Hiromi tried to argue, but I actually considered it and shook my head. Actually, if we gathered a few armed vehicles like that, and stored them for emergencies, that's not a bad idea. We might take gigs where we have to hit AVs or need to take out an armored transport. Having something like that in storage isn't a bad idea. Hiromi looked like she was going to argue, but her shoulders slumped. That's true. Yes. Malcolm fist pumped, because that meant we were definitely taking heavily weaponized vehicles for ourselves. Okay, but back to the point. That thing is super dangerous. What do? We infiltrate their camp and kill them before they get a chance to get in their rides, I offered with a shrug. I'll just have to be super careful if any of the thieves manage to get into their vehicles. That could be pretty dangerous. It made me consider whether I needed to bring my Uragan, but that might be overkill. Nekomata should punch through the armor pretty well, and at close range and not standing on top of a moving vehicle, I should be able to hit the driver. Alright. Let's get everything we need sorted out tonight, and we can head out in the morning to Dakota's garage. Hiromi called out, clapping her hands to refocus us all. We will have a mission budget, so run things through me, and we can get everything sorted out. Don't forget to bring lots of water, I added, looking at my chums who all rolled their eyes at me. The next morning we all met up at Hiromi's parking garage, and Hiromi dropped a new issue on our heads. Dad wants to talk to everyone about the gig? I think he just wants to meet my chums, Hiromi added, looking nervous as we all arrived. Ichi, Malcolm, and I looked at each other, and I could tell the boys weren't interested, but Ichi shrugged and Malcolm relented a moment after. Sure, I guess. If our client wants to meet, I'm not against it, I added, and Hiromi looked relieved as we all headed towards the elevators. The ride up was quiet and I could see Hiromi sort of buzzing with anxiety, but we stepped out and over to her door, which she opened and led us in. There, sitting at the big table in the dining area, was Hiromi's father. That same sort of sinister look behind his eyes was present just like before. Ah, Hiromi. I see you brought your little friends. Good. Why don't all of you come over for a minute? This won't take long. He called out, waving us over, but I noticed didn't actually ask, or offer us a seat. Once we walked over, he looked the three of us that weren't Hiromi up and down, paying particular attention to me. You look like you are doing well, Motoko, wasn't it? Yes. Nice to see you again as well. I hope that our completion of your gig will meet your satisfaction, I added, and he simply smiled lightly, like he was looking at a child showing a finger painting, or a small dog. I'm not overly concerned, which is why I agreed to let Hiromi take on the contract for this issue. My true concern is that my daughter comes to no harm while working this gig. I hope you understand my meaning. I nodded to the man, while my mind was buzzing. That's right. Arasaka was full of people like him. Arrogant men and women, that don't actually care about the bottom line, just as long as their pet projects or comforts were respected. Who cares if Arasaka lost a shipment, as long as they weren't the ones directly responsible for it? That just meant they could remove some upstart below them, securing their own power. Throw eddies at some mercs to see if they could kill the ones that attacked them. Problem solved. No longer a problem. This guy didn't care about the shipment. Didn't care about killing the ones responsible. Very likely if Hiromi hadn't offered to take the contract, he would have just filled in a report somewhere about how he had hired some mercs with company eddies and they hadn't found anything. All the while just pocketing the money and never bothering to actually investigate. This was a sign of the arrogance and corruption within Arasaka at this time. But I didn't care. As much as Hiromi planned on joining the corporation, I didn't, and didn't have any reason or desire to try and fix it. I would happily take the eddies though. Daddy, I already told you what I would be doing. I'll be at a Nomad Fixers base the whole time. Hiromi did not quite whine, but I noticed her lie right away. She was planning on helping when it comes to cleared camps. I wasn't going to call her out on it though. Alright. Well, I mostly just wanted to see my daughter's little friends. Hey, putting together a merc group at 15. What a goal-getter. You'll go far if you keep that ambition, honey. He added, with the fakest fake laugh I had ever heard, and the way he said honey made it sound like a foreign word on his tongue. Hiromi just smiled at her dad though. Whatever, it was time. We were all dismissed after that, and Malcolm and Ichi both hurried for the door, obviously uncomfortable. Yeah, I get that, Tooms. We were quiet on the elevator ride back to the garage, where we finally seemed to relax. Alright team, mount up. We have a long drive to get to. I called, and that got everyone moving. Ichi and Malcolm jumped in his van, and Hiromi joined me in the quadra. We caravanned out of the city. I kept it slow, making sure Ichi had protection on the drive. Time for the hunt to begin. Dakota had been true to her word, giving us a few different camp locations that we could check out. I had left my chums behind, and headed out, parking far away from the first camp. I had hiked for a while under the sun. Thankfully it wasn't too hot, and I had a water bottle, so I was fine. Unfortunately I hadn't noticed any sensor equipment out in the desert, so I was pretty sure I could have just driven right up. Oh well, it was worth it just for the ninja aspect. 9-inch nails, 9-inch nails. Crawling through some old brambles gave me a good covered position as I looked into the camp. It was an old tunnel, probably a mine. The entrance was only sort of fortified. I noticed a mediocre attempt at putting up trash into a wall around the exterior, but it wasn't even tall enough to block my sight as I scanned over the camp. I only saw one vehicle, and it wasn't the one I was searching for. But there were tire tracks leading into the mine, so they likely parked inside. There were a few electronic defenses, cameras, and I saw an old dirty HMG turret scanning at the entrance of the camp set up on an old fridge by the looks of it. I'm at the camp. Checking it out now. I'm not sure this is our target, but I'll be checking out the mine to make sure. Sending details. I spoke into the group chat, while sending pictures by text to my chums. We were still on comms with each other. We were still close enough to Night City that we had our agents working just fine after all. Not seeing a lot of people, Malcolm noted, and I nodded to myself. I think they are inside the mine, probably cooler in there. Watch out for traps. There might be landmines or something. Hiromi added, and I chuckled aloud, but didn't send it through the agent. I'll keep my eyes open, I assured her instead. That car, I don't think it has the weapons our target has. Malcolm added in, but Ichi instantly responded. They might not weaponize every vehicle. Don't want your underlings driving something that can take you out after all. Alright chums. I'm moving in. Going dark. I felt my smile widen as I said that. So fucking cool. Then I clambered out of the bushes and wiped the brambles out of my hair before moving closer. There were a few people outside in the camp proper. Time to introduce myself. I stalked up until I was close enough I could hack the cameras without the lag potentially interfering in my breach. Slipped into the defenses, and uploaded my ghost demon into the network. Now I would be a lot harder for any of their sensor equipment to catch. I also sent a ping through the network, watching as the lines blurred into vision. Yep, there were 3 gonks outside the cave, and at least a dozen more inside. That could be irritating depending on how they were camped out. I considered just slipping into the cave, going through it and scouting the place without killing anyone, but honestly, leaving myself without an exit was a really bad idea. Fact was, stealth was good, one of my best skills, maybe even a bit op, but it could fail, as it had against Thomas, and getting caught without an escape could actually lead to my death. So quiet, consistent, and deadly it was. The 3 gonks outside were all doing their own thing. One was working on the car that was parked outside. It looks like the car had something wrong with it, and he couldn't drive it inside. Another was inside a small shack near the entrance to the mine. With a bit of peeking through the cameras I could faintly hear some commercial playing, so he was just chilling. The third looked to actually be on guard duty, which was weird for a Rathan camp.
There was an overhang near the HMG turret they had set up, and he was sitting in the shade looking out over the desert with a big old grad sniper resting beside him.
Okay.
I slipped closer, taking control of the cameras and locking them into an angle that would make sure it couldn't catch sight of what was going to happen. I slipped over the trash without a sound. As I did so, my hands were busy, quickly pulling free my Lexington and the silencer, and in one move slowly screwing them together. Then once I had that taken care of, I pulled my knife. I hadn't actually used the silencer in a real-life condition yet, didn't want to misjudge a shot and have a ricocheting bullet alert the camp, so no long-range shooting with it yet. I actually ignored the guard first. I had no idea what their guard schedule was like, so I wanted to leave him alive until I was ready to move into the mine. Instead I scurried under old trash and busted equipment until I was at the entrance to the mine. The gonk inside watching TV was first. I scoped out the little shed and narrowed my eyes in a little frustration. I don't know if I could slip in without being seen. So I raised up my pistol held in my right hand, my knife in my left raised up to help support, and I stalked closer. Getting up to the hut, I peeked through some of the wood slats and got my first look at the woman that was inside. She was actually working on something while she watched TV, her hands busy with some tools as she stared down at her workbench. Well, that made this easier. I did actually slip in, while she was distracted, and a moment later her throat was missing and I carried her gently to the ground. 500 XP gained. 1 down. I stepped out and stalked towards the gonk working on his car. It's kinda funny how often I've killed someone doing this. He was at the side of the car actually changing out the wheel. I considered it. Should I just let him finish before killing him? It would save my team or the nomads some work later. I shook it off, stalked up and with a vicious move tore out his throat as well. I stayed down with him for a moment, making sure no noise had alerted the guard, but it was quiet. 500 XP gained. With that I went after the last one. But since there was no one else outside, I figured I might as well get some experience. I got close enough, lined up a shot and pulled. The sound of the bullet in the air wasn't entirely quiet, but it was a whole lot quieter than a normal shot. 500 XP gained. The man slumped and I nodded. Cool. 3 down. A dozen more to go. With the outside cleared out, I had some time to prep just in case something bad happened. So I went over to the HMG turret. It hadn't spotted me yet, and with just a moment's work turned it off, reset its targeting to the gonk's data, and then started it back up. Then I aimed it at the entrance. Hey. If they were in a car and really moving, it likely wouldn't hit them, but if they came out on foot, or came out in a car slowly, that HMG would tear them up. I spent a few minutes looking around for anything else of use, but it looks like most of the stuff on the surface was trash. I mean, there was literally a pit that they threw all of their trash away at. Gross. With that I was ready. I walked back to the entrance, and once more slipped into the camera system. There were a few cameras deeper into the cave, and I used them now. Slowly looking through the 3 additional viewpoints inside. One showed me the hallway just inside the mine. The other was panning over a larger room that looked like their taken-over garage. I took a moment to scan the vehicles I could see, but didn't find the car that I was here to find. The camera couldn't see everything, but it was a sign that we were at the wrong place. Which didn't impact me at all, because these fuckers were wraiths. There were a few non-wraith vehicles in the garage I could see that had very obviously been shot up. Not even touching on the more civilian vehicles that were definitely people they had chosen for kidnapping. I knew that because the last camera showed a fucking cage of all things. Thankfully it was empty. With ping I had locations of the wraiths, and I started planning out my route. Then I rose, my vision returning to my own eyes as I slipped inside. The camera at the end of the stone shaft only picked me up as a small blur as I darted in the darkness. 3 of them were in the garage room. The 3 were doing normal things, checking out their rides, and relaxing. They had no reason to think there was any danger here after all. They had defenses, cameras, and even a watch guard. I slipped in, slipping between the nomad upgraded vehicles like a wraith myself. First Gonk was out of sight of the others sitting in the driver's seat of his car, fiddling with some dash installation. I slammed the knife into his throat and yanked him right down, so they couldn't see him through the windows.
I left him gurgling to death, bleeding out over the tile with near-silent drops onto the concrete. Number 2 and 3 were close together, shooting the shit while they did maintenance. Luckily I had 2 weapons. I leapt, slamming my knife in and out of the throat in a rush of movement as I lined up the shot and fired. The near-silent shot slammed into his skull, and I took a moment to shoot another 2 rounds into the man just to make sure he couldn't send an alert or something. Then it was quiet. 500 XP gained. 500 XP gained. 500 XP gained. Ninjutsu skill level up. Ninjutsu level 9. I hadn't even noticed it leveling while taking out this group, but that was amazing. I took a moment to just feel the minor adjustments it guided me towards, how to move just that much faster while remaining silent. I moved on. The garage area led into a dense set of HARP buildings. Probably the mine's original offices, or crew quarters. I moved up to the front entrance and readied myself. There were no cameras inside. No way to know what was coming. Lexington was reloaded and ready, and I opened the door. Just a hallway with a few doors leading off. I blinked and the golden lights of pink showed me where the people were. I smiled as I narrowed down on one that was alone behind the first door. I stalked over and slowly peeked the door open. Bedroom. Sleeping Gonk. A few moments later he was dead. 500 XP gained. I crept out and frowned. The next batch weren't alone. They were all together. I narrowed my eyes as the idea hit me. Okay, can't go quiet anymore. Time to go loud. I came up to the door, they were behind, and slowly slid the door open just a crack. It was a lounge room, food and a TV was set up, and everyone inside, all 10 of them, were relaxing and chatting. The main squad of the Wraiths. I scanned all of them, and held myself back from whistling. Most of them were just minor bits and bobs of chrome, but their leader was a Borg. A real tough-looking guy. Not mains level, but someone that would give June a run for his money. Okay, time to prep. I started breaching into each and every one of them, being extra careful with the leader. While I did that, my hands worked the grenade I kept attached to my belt free. It wouldn't be enough, on its own, but with a bit of extra net running havoc, I think I could do this. I nodded as I breached into the last gong. All of them had their defenses punched right through. It was time. I slammed reboot optics into their system. Only one of the gongs noticed something was wrong, as I saw a guy looking like a netrunner himself sit up as the hack was uploaded. I opened the door, popped the pin on my grenade and chucked it right at him. The tableau of frozen horror that I earned as they realized what was happening was perfect, as their sight was then instantly taken from them. I drew both my Lexington and my Booyah, as their sight vanished, as they all started moving to try and grab a weapon. Then the first round of my Booyah roared out, right at the Borg leader. Something went wrong. Between one moment and the next he had disappeared. Sandevistan. But that wasn't all. I had gotten a look at him face to face, eye to eye. Only one of the man's eyes was cyberware. I instantly backtracked. Knowing what was coming, leaping out the other way of the door, suddenly a gun started firing and the doorway I had been in was filled with shrapnel. More than a few fragments struck me, but nothing that got through my armor and subdermal. I started running. The grenade made an echoing boom behind me, but I just booked it. This hallway was not a good place to stand around in, even with blinded gonks. The walls were too thin and I really didn't want to get randomly shot. Plus a Sandevistan Borg was too much to face head-on. Had to get better terrain. Then I heard it. Boots on the floor, running, and focused. Sandevistan Borg was chasing just as I expected. I kept running, leaping over cars, or sliding on top of their hoods to get to the other side, then gunfire roared behind me, and I winced as I felt something slam into my back. I fell into a roll, ignoring the burning in my back. I had my Kangtao armor, my leotard and my subdermal stopping whatever just hit me, but it still hurt. I let myself roll forward and then once I had my feet there I leapt again. Pushing myself far down the mine shaft, giving myself a chance to respond. The distance was everything I needed. I turned around. He moved fast, but he wasn't David Martinez. He blurred as he zipped down the hallway, the noise of his movement coming in short bursts as he moved like a lot of low-level Sandevistan users I've noticed. There was this stop and go to their movement, as if they needed to regain their grip on the ground before being able to push forward again. It didn't matter though. He was in my sight and his security was already in tatters. "Get back here, you netrunning bitch!" his voice roared, and I just rolled my eyes. Man, did these guys never get any better dialogue? It was always, "Fuck you," or "Bitch this." I uploaded my newest hack. Short circuit activated. There was an instant crackle of electricity as the Borg dropped out of his hyperspeed. Lightning ran over his body as his batteries began an emergency discharge, but at the speed he was moving? I smiled in enjoyment as the Sandevistan user went from charging at me, a very dangerous prospect, to slamming face first into the concrete and sliding along, leaving a trail of red in his wake as he became a meat marker. "Got you," I told him, as I raised my booyah and fired. His head disappeared in a splatter, and I just sighed and stretched, before refocusing. Reloading the booyah, I hurried back to the room. Some of the wraiths might still be alive. I led with my Lexington as I entered the hub, and as I crept closer, I heard moaning mixed with calls for help, and even a few angry yells. As I peeked in, I relaxed. My grenade had done some serious damage, outright killing the netrunner, and another gonk, while leaving the rest of them in no shape to do much. Especially since they were still blind. I started lining up shots and firing as I stepped in. None of them were capable of stopping me, as the remaining wraiths freaked out at their own incoming silent demise. Only once it was done did I truly relax, pinging the network again just to confirm there was no one else connected. I pulled up a chair that was mostly intact from the table and plopped down, wincing a bit as my back touched the chair. I sighed. "All right, chooms. Place is clear. Not our target. Go ahead and get here to start looting," and informed Dakota we got some vehicles for her. Then I just relaxed for a bit, looking at my system. 1000 XP gained. 500 XP gained. 1000 XP gained. 500 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 XP gained. 6000 XP just for that room. Nice. Very nice. I did get an alert as well, and it was one I hadn't seen in a while. Quick hacks skill level up. Quick hacks 8. The lowest of my net running skill. I closed my eyes as I took in the knowledge about how to upload hacks just a bit faster, a bit sneakier. I eventually got moving again after I gave myself a break. I needed to search every inch of this place for traps so my chooms wouldn't accidentally step into something. Thankfully it looks like their only security had been outside the mine. It wasn't like much could get down here without going through the entrance after all. But while doing that, I did find something else interesting. Laptops. Not just the big one in the Netrunner's cave. No, there were personal computers all over the place. I found the leader's room, and he had a laptop as well. Now I wasn't expecting a convenient shard laying around telling me this guy's life story and how he was a bad person, but wraiths were a gang. They were Raf and Shiv joined together. Sure, I highly doubted they got along group to group, but that doesn't mean there wasn't some communication. So I pulled up his laptop, didn't even need to unlock it as it was already unlocked. Then I pulled up his emails. I ran back the list of emails to the day the transport was broken, and started checking. No. Gross. No. That was interesting, and might be something Dakota had an interest in. No. Hell no. Gross. I winced, quickly closing that particular email. Long-distance relationships were still a thing, I guess, and for a guy stuck out in the Badlands, I guess he still wanted to get along with his girlfriend. And I now knew what a Mr. Stud looked like. Yuck. More and more I went through them, learning more about Terry Terra Hamilton, the wraith I had flatlined. And then there it was. 3 days after the hijacking. An email complaining to a guy about how he was pissed that Isaac had hit the Arasaka AV. That he could have done it just as well, if he had known. So he couldn't have done it basically, but it was exactly what I needed. I had a name now. Isaac. I continued to search through the laptop, checking if there was any more information on Isaac, but didn't find anything, but that was fine. We had the Badlands fixer working with us.
An Isaac of the Wraiths that had enough power to take out an Arasaka AV?
That should narrow it down.
Malcolm let out a low whistle as he looked over the place.
That's a lot of stuff we can grab.
We have extra vehicles we can commandeer as well, if the van isn't enough. Ichi answered. I was showing the two boys the rooms inside the mining harp, including the Netrunner's setup.
Well, we will have to. A lot of this stuff is expensive, Malcolm added, having been checking out the rooms.
Well, find out what the most expensive stuff is, or at least the stuff we can sell, run it past Hiromi and stuff, I added, and then mostly just stepped away from it. Hiromi had been very firm that I should stay away from anything to do with eddies as my sense of money was off in her words. I grumbled but walked away, to meet Hiromi, who was in the garage alongside Dakota's handler for this. The Nomad was going over vehicles while Hiromi watched on with a smirk. I could practically see the eddies in her eyes. Good, she would make sure we get a big paycheck, but I wanted to know where our next target was. Hiromi, get anything on Isaac? I asked her quietly as I walked up beside her, and she looked away to send me a confident nod. Yeah, Dakota knew exactly who it was. She replied, her eyes flashing, as she sent me a text. The information Dakota had sent reached my eyes and I looked it over. Dakota hadn't considered Isaac to be a potential target for the raid. Although reading through the information she had on him, I instantly suspected she had purposefully chosen not to share that information with us so we might actually take out some of the troublesome wraiths in the area. It would be the exact sort of thing a fixer like her would pull off, only revealing the info if we hadn't found it ourselves in the end. For a price. It doesn't matter now. We had the name, and she gave us the location. Isaac Webb was a wraith leader. The sort of crazy fuck that caused people to flock to him out of fear of being his next target. He wasn't super close to our current location, his outpost was well away from the city. But at least we had a location now. I moved away from Hiromi so she could focus on her work and met back up with Malcolm and Ichi, helping the boys find the expensive stuff and load it up. We took a few hours clearing out the base to the best of our ability. Ichi proved his skill with power tools to completely disassemble anything of value that was bolted down. We ended up taking 2 more vans from the Wraith's garage. Both were clunkers, but as long as they could get us out of the Badlands, that was all we needed. Packing the 2 vans into a garage that Dakota was renting us, we all met up to take care of the next part of the gig. This is going to be difficult, I said, looking over the data that Dakota had on Isaac's Wraith group. For the last 8 months Isaac had grown very large, pulling in small Wraith groups from all over. Not even Dakota knew why. After all, the larger the group the more costly it was to keep them. More food, more tutu to fuel their vehicles, which only drained more and more as more nomads grouped up. It's why most Wraith groups were small. A dozen people or so max, to keep everything moving quickly. They were nomads after all, staying put was against their usual mo. But Isaac had stayed put, and grown large. According to Dakota's information, it wasn't the first time someone had done that. Sometimes men wanted to be kings of their little groups, and would grow too large, usually bloating up until the food and eddies ran out, and then they would shatter apart. Isaac hadn't hit that part, and with the Arasaka raid likely wouldn't for a while, especially if he was selling off the equipment, or got paid by someone to do the raid in the first place. So he was trouble. The place he was hanging out in was just an old electrical substation. An old building probably put up in the 1980s from how old it looked. Yet, they were gathering around it. Flocking to it. Luckily Dakota had been interested in what was going on, and we had some footage of the place from miles away. It was a month old, but at least it would give us an idea of what we were looking at. We were all hunched over the display that we had set up in the back of Ichi's van. We had emptied it out after arriving at the garage Dakota was renting us, and we had spent the evening preparing for the next raid. The other 2 vans still packed full of goodies to sell. Hiromi had even sold some of it to Dakota directly earlier. Now we were settled in and studying. All 4 of us were camped out, planning on sleeping in the van for the night and maybe hit the place in the morning once we had a plan. Unfortunately it wasn't going super well. Isaac had a netrunner, a good one, which of course he did. He also had a lot of weapons, and a lot of people to use them. He was becoming a growing terror in the Badlands, and having so many wraiths was a daunting prospect. If I had a workable tactical advantage, maybe, but with a netrunner working with him, I wouldn't be able to do much without killing the runner first. Maybe a distraction, the nomads? Malcolm offered, and I shook my head. Dakota and the Aldecaldos are not going to get involved any further. Period. Dakota had been completely firm. As far as the nomads were concerned, this was my problem. None of them wanted the heat of getting involved. And using you guys as a distraction defeats the purpose of a stealth mission. I did consider calling in help. I had an array of contacts by now outside of this. Panam, June, Jackie, V, Main's crew even. Yet I hesitated. I wasn't really the kind of person to be blinded by pride, but this was my gig. My chance for XP, one that would really help boost me up. There would be at least 50 people to flatline. If I could get them all, that was a lot of XP. I took a deep breath. I didn't need help on this, I just needed to put enough advantages in my corner. I'll need to sneak in. The place isn't exactly securely set up. Plenty of places to slip in through the desert. It'll be a long walk, and I'll need to watch for mines, but I can get there. The problem is inside. The substation is ancient. No idea where anything will be. But once the netrunner is down, I'll have access to their system. I can upload some hacks to the entire network from there. Short Circuit was going to get a lot of work on the assault, I knew. But, can you even reach the netrunner? Obviously he is going to be somewhere secure. Hiromi added, looking over the digital map, and all I could do was nod. If there was a netrunner controlling the system, I wouldn't even be able to risk turning off the cameras. I would have to do a complete stealth op. I shook it off. We only really have one choice. I need to do an actual scouting mission on the place. I said, Dakota's data was good, but it wasn't entirely current, and I needed to get my eyes on the substation. I might see something that Dakota's data missed. An entrance, or a weak point. Even a window left open to keep cool could be the difference between success and failure. More importantly, I needed to find the netrunner without even touching the net. Sure, I might be able to get in, but I might also alert the runner if he was good enough, and I just didn't know. So I was treating him as monstrously skilled. I needed to find and kill him before anything else. In the end, nothing concrete was hammered out. We discussed entry points and numbers, but I would need to scout the place to learn more. We all went to bed in the back of Itchy's truck that night, mentally preparing for tomorrow.